Please don't draft Josh Allen at pick 20 in sleeper redraft. There are quarterbacks with just as much upside going 13 and 17 picks later, and if you wait to draft those quarterbacks instead, you can get a difference-making running back or wide receiver and have a much better team overall. By the end of the video, you will know who those players are and why, in my opinion, they have just as much upside this season and potentially more. Please remember to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. So, as I said earlier, Josh Allen is going at pick 20 in sleeper redraft at the 208. This is way too early in my opinion. First of all, there are running backs like Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, Josh Jacobs going after him, and the drop-off of running back talent after these next couple of rounds is so much greater than the difference between Josh Allen going here and the two quarterbacks that I'm going to mention going later. Also, there are players like Mike Evans and Jalen Waddle going after this. And trust me, if you end up with these running backs or wide receivers in your running back or receiving room, and then one of these elite quarterbacks later, your team will look much better overall in 2024, and you'll have a much better chance at a fantasy championship. I like Josh Allen, and he is my #1 ranked quarterback. The only thing is, he shouldn't be as far ahead in his ADP as he is compared to some of these other elite quarterbacks. And I think that the difference between him and the other elite quarterbacks being drafted at least one full round later is going to be the make or break difference between you winning a fantasy championship or losing. So Josh Allen was the QB1 this past season. He's 6'5", 237. He's still only 28.2 years old. He is amazing. When we look at his points per game, his 24.6 in 2021 were good for first. His 24.3 in 2022 were good for third. Then his 24.2 were still good for first in 2023. So while he's been elite in the past couple of seasons, let's think about what led him to being the elite quarterback that he has been the past couple of seasons. The arrival of Stefon Diggs is what did this. Well, Diggs, first of all, was getting older and much less effective, especially in the latter half of this past season. Then they traded him away. And all they did really is sign Curtis Samuel and draft Keon Coleman. One thing, I don't have any issue with Keon Coleman. I just don't think they're going to use him effectively. I think he's going to be a very good asset in the red zone. And I think he would be better used as a big slot or potentially a flanker because, first of all, he isn't quick or fast. He struggles against zone coverage and he struggles to separate in general. Those are all skills that you really need to play X, and they've said they're going to play him at X. So now, if they do decide to change that up, then he can be more effective, but he doesn't have the skills, the prerequisites to being a good X receiver. Then his other assets in the passing game and the receiving corps specifically are Curtis Samuel, who's a fine Z receiver, and Khalil Shakir, who can play Z or Y. They're fine. And Dalton Kincaid is an above average tight end. But overall, in terms of Josh Allen's receiving room, this is the worst he's had since before Stefon Diggs. And I really think that he is not going to have quite the amount of upside that he has had the past couple of seasons here. Although I still think that he's going to be the #1. I just don't think he's going to be quite at 24 points per game anymore without Stefon Diggs. When we look at his deep ball catchable target rate, his 39.2% was good for 29th. So really not the best, although he does have a cannon for an arm. And then when you look at his pressured catchable pass rate, his 44.5% was good for 30th. Now, the reason for this is Stefon Diggs was a great deep threat and was able to get quick separation. He doesn't have that anymore. So what is that going to do? That's going to lead to him not having the deep threats that he had before, and then also probably getting more pressure because he doesn't have somebody like Stefon Diggs to get open immediately. Then when we look at his fantasy points per dropback, his 0.68 was good for second in the NFL. That's probably going down just a little bit. Then when we look at his team pass plays per game, his 34.1 was good for 16th. I do expect that to increase just a little bit. but I don't think it's going to be top 5 or anything, and I don't think it's going to be that much of a difference for him this season. Then when we look at his pace of play, they finished 24th this past season. That's pretty low. Less plays equals less opportunities for him to get more points for you. And then his interceptable passes of 27 was good for second most in the entire NFL. So overall, I think that his upside, his ceiling, is being lowered without Stephon Diggs there. He's prone to interceptions and poor catchable passes when he's pressured. And I think that without the quick separation of Stephon Diggs, he's not going to be quite as elite as he once was, although I still think due to his massive rushing upside. And now, while I still think he's going to be the number 1 quarterback, I don't think the point disparity between him and the next couple of quarterbacks is going to be worth drafting him a full round to round and a half over the other elite quarterbacks this year. So Patrick Mahomes is going off the board at pick 33 or the 309 in sleeper redraft. I think he is a much better value. So looking at his fantasy points per game, for instance, in 2021, he had 22, which was good for 5th. Then in 2022, he had 25.1, which was 2nd. And in 2023, it did dip down to 18.4, which was 10th. I think he's going to be much, much closer to that 25.1 that he had in 2022 than the 18.4 he had this past season. This past season, Travis Kelce was really showing signs of decline until the very end of the year. He had no deep threat anymore. MVS and Kadarius Toney were out there. Sky Moore. Rashee Rice is a little bit overrated. He's a very poor route runner, although he is a decent yards after catch guy. But here's the thing. What did they do? They easily and potentially, there is no such thing as too much, but it's like they almost overinvested in speed. Now they have Hollywood Brown to be their X receiver and Xavier Worthy to be their vertical Z. That is game-breaking speed. So they have 2 deep threats now, Rashee Rice in the slot and Travis Kelce. They also have Isaiah Pacheco to bring some balance to the offense and keep it being efficient. Patrick Mahomes is going to be much, much better for you in 2024 than he was in 2023. When we look at their team pass plays per game of 37.4, that was 2nd. So once again, more opportunities equals more opportunities for you to get points. When we look at his accuracy rating versus man, his 7.3 is good for 4th in the entire NFL, and his 7.6 versus zone is also good for 4th. So top 5 against both zone and man defenses. Then when we look at his true completion percentage of 75.8%, that was 1st in the entire NFL. So he's very accurate. They run a lot of pass plays per game. So he's very accurate. They run a lot of pass plays per game. And he received 2 vertical playmakers with a lot of speed to complement Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce. That is a recipe for success for Patrick Mahomes, and I think he's going to be much closer to Josh Allen and going to make it so that this disparity of 13 spots is not justified. So now we have Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. He's coming off a QB4 finish. He is being taken at pick 37 or the 401. So once again, 17 spots lower than Josh Allen. I cannot justify the difference between their ADPs. Now, when we look at his fantasy points per game, his 21.1 were good for 7th in 2021. Then his 20.3 were good for 6th in 2022. And he had 21.1 again, which was 3rd most this past season. So here's one reason I'm really optimistic about him this season. Look at his passing yards in 2023 compared to 2022 and 2021. Admittedly, he only played 12 games in each of those 2 seasons, but then look at his completion percentage. His 67.2 was much higher than either of these past 2 seasons, and then look at his yards per attempt, 8.0. They brought in Zay Flowers this past season. He looked pretty good. I do expect him to take a step up this season. They still have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. I'd like them to run more 12 personnel. They did draft Devontae Walker, who can be a situational deep threat, although I don't think he's anything special, and I've been praying for Rashad Bateman to do something for years, and I'm not hopeful for him. But here's the thing that makes Lamar Jackson really, really safe. He was second in carries per game, third in red zone carries, third in red zone carries per game, first in rushing yards per game, and fourth with 5 rushing touchdowns. So he receives a ton of carries. He's very efficient and gets a lot of yards with those carries, and he does have rushing touchdown upside. I think this offense is going to be absolutely scary. And while I do think that Derrick Henry is going to vulture a lot of touchdowns, I just think that there's going to be so many touchdowns that Lamar Jackson is going to have more fantasy points per game this season than he's had in any of the past 3 seasons. I mean, this guy has legitimate 1,000 and ultimately 1,200 plus yard rushing upside any given year. That is by far the most rushing upside of any quarterback in terms of yardage, at least. But that rushing floor is so precious when it comes to elevating quarterbacks to the elite status. Really, Patrick Mahomes is one of the only quarterbacks that, in general, can have less than 400 rushing yards and be an elite quarterback every year, and it takes him being so much better than everybody else as a passer. Now, Lamar Jackson isn't Patrick Mahomes, but his rushing upside is much better than that. His situation is still really, really good. They're going to be more efficient this season, and you also can draft him 17 spots later, which allows you to get, say, Jalen Waddle before him or Mike Evans. So your team is going to look better with someone like Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes at the end of the 3rd or the beginning of the 4th round, as opposed to taking Josh Allen at the end of the 2nd. So there you have it. I would much rather have Patrick Mahomes at pick 33 or Lamar Jackson at pick 37 than Josh Allen at pick 20. Remember that with Josh Allen, he doesn't have the best accuracy when it comes to the deep ball, and when he is pressured, his accuracy really suffers. And then he lost his number 1 target. He became an elite quarterback the moment he had a number 1 target like Diggs. And then Diggs also was able to get him quick separation. I don't think that he's going to have anybody like that in Buffalo this year. So I think that his ceiling is going to be lowered a little bit from what it once was, although I still think he's going to be the number 1 quarterback just by not enough of a disparity to justify drafting him 13 slots higher than Mahomes and 17 slots higher than Jackson. Remember that Patrick Mahomes now has Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy as vertical playmakers, along with Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce underneath, along with Isaiah Pacheco to bring balance to the offense. He's going to be incredibly efficient. He's top 4 in accuracy against zone and man coverage. He is going to go bonkers this season. And then as far as Lamar Jackson, his yards were up this past season. His yards per attempt were up this past season. He finished 1st in rushing yards, 4th in rushing touchdowns, and he was 2nd or 3rd in just about any rushing stat besides yards per game. So that brings you such a safe floor. So with the probable improvement of Zay Flowers in his 2nd season, along with having Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, I do expect him to be very efficient, and he and Derrick Henry are going to be really, really challenging for defenses to stop this season. So in the video above, there are 2 tight ends going in the beginning of round 3 that I think are very poor values at their ADP, and you can get tight ends in the end of round 4 and beginning of round 5 that have just as much upside. I also have my seasonal tight end rankings 1 through 24, and they're also ordered in tiers. Please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you and have a good day.